So I'm going to talk about my clan father, Louis Tewanima, who was the Carlisle Indian boarding school Olympian. Identifying first and foremost as a Hopi woman, I would like to introduce myself in my language, and I provide you with the English translation as I go. Sheilah Nicholas Bahat Katsit Nitu Litakai Kivet Efyan Tewanima Nikan Nipiu Hopi no Neka Panwat Mumim Namata Nani Nukotahun Manayan Hopi Matsiwa Nukalwangwa Put Nusongo Pangaksino Numuyi Kalwangwat Yuta Put Aho Ahilat Pekosmo Wat Nata Put Nui Pekos Hainum Kwawangwa Dok Milton Nicholas is Wanga Wunda Put Equa I also want to go back and acknowledge that I am on the ancestral lands of the Lenape, the Susquehanna, and Shawnee. I'm honored to be a guest on these lands and to share our histories of resistance, resilience, and persistence. I'm here as a descendant of Louis Tewanima, whose history at Carlisle Indian School is seemingly a demonstration of success in Pratt's transformative model through the white man's education. I'm here to rewrite, spelled R-I-G-H-T, and retell his story of resistance and persistence as a demonstration of a deep sense of selfhood and unwavering commitment to be Hopi, in defiance of the logic of elimination, as Chaninela Waima said, a living model of humility. His story has been silenced back home because his wife would not allow him to speak about it. And at 4 feet, 4.5 inches tall, he was in the shadow of Jim Thorpe. Tewanima and 10 other Hopis came by train from their homelands located today in the northeastern region of what is now the state of Arizona. Ironically, statehood was granted on February 14, 1912, the year of his departure from Carlisle. This is one view of the village of Songopavi, where we both are from, on Second Mesa. And the most important thing is that they didn't come as children, they came as prisoners of war and as adults. Their stories remain silent outside of my clan father today. It's 2,000 miles by car. I don't know how long it was by train, but it was pretty long. Tewanima, or Tata, as I knew him, was a familiar figure in our village and in my childhood memory in his elder years. This is how I remember him. In the complex Hopi clan system, he was my clan father because he was from the same clan, the Bearsrat clan, as my biological father. All men in his clan are my fathers. At birth, I became a child of their clan's people. In addition, his adopted daughter, Joanne, who passed away 3 years ago, became my godmother during my initiation into the Kiva Society when I was very young. She was a member of the Bear clan, thus my Hopi name reflects her clan totem. Spending time with my godmother and thus in Tewanima's home, a framed picture of a white man was a curious image, but I never asked about it. Later, I would learn that this was his coach at Carlisle, Pop Warner. The traditional clothing he's wearing was familiar. He was often a featured figure at the annual 4th of July powwow in Flagstaff, Arizona, dressed as such. He garnered a lot of attention, and often white people would come into the village looking for him. No one ever told us who they were, and we never asked. I recently learned that Tata's wife, Blanche, is also a Sun Forehead clan member, thus a member of my clan's people. So my relationship is directly through both of my biological parents. Although my parents and I were living in Winslow, a border town 60 miles from Hopi, my mother and I were visiting my mother's kia, or aunt, my so'o, grandmother, that evening on January 18, 1969. I remember clearly the alarm and the beginning of a search for Tata the rest of the night. The news that he had been found came shortly after daybreak. The stories of what happened began. He was in the kiva, but had left alone. Surely because of his poor eyesight in the darkness, he mistook a light in the distance coming from another village. as that of his home and headed toward it and fell 70 feet down the mesa cliff to his death. It would be during my graduate studies that Tata's life history would draw my attention again. My master's thesis turned me to the Hopi experience with Western education. I learned that Tata had stood up for the Hopi way of life and against the federal government's approach to introducing education by force and violence. The stories of parents hiding children in the storage rooms under stacks of sheepskins to keep them from being captured and taken to boarding school in Keams Canyon. Along with other village leaders, he was identified and labeled as a hostile. This was not the first time. Others had been incarcerated and sent as prisoners of war to Alcatraz in San Francisco. This time, Tata, along with 10 others, were sent to Carlisle Indian boarding school to learn the benefits of Western education. These images are of the Hopi landscape, where Tata came from, where he was anchored, and where I believe he returned mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, every time he ran. He kept home, family, and community at heart through running. Hopi running works as a cultural antidote to adversity, Wexler et al. Say, and helped him make the best of socially ambiguous situations, as Chanino Lamoai also stated, but did not sacrifice identity and ideals as they incorporated Western education into the decisions they made. Recently, or yesterday, I was in the tribal archives, digital archives, and I learned from one of the Arrow issues that when they arrived at Carlisle, on the day they came, and within 24 hours, they had cut their hair, took off their ornaments, and dressed in the white man's way. So I'm really thinking that this is one of the ways that they made the best of a socially ambiguous situation. His grandson, Ben Devamsa, says, "We run because it is a tradition. There is no other reason. The deeper meaning is that it is a way of life. It's a culture. Running is an integral part of Hopi ceremonies." Going too fast here. The Hopi run is a prayer for rain and the good things in life: family, happiness, life to old age without sickness, bounty. Before every ceremonial race can start, there is a call out to the spirits in all four directions to join the runners to the finish line at the village. Every able young Hopi is expected to be a runner. During ceremonies, young runners are designated to run great distances to gather sacred water from distant springs for the ceremonies and to deliver sacred prayer feathers to the distant shrines. This is considered an honor, one that is never declined. The reward is life-sustaining sacred water that the runner can take to the cornfields as a symbol of praying for rain and a good crop. Tata not only stood for the Hopi way of life, but carried out his responsibility. Steadfast in his beliefs and thinking in these ways, he lived by these principles of humility, what we term okiwa, while simultaneously experiencing colonization. At this time, Ben also was talking with me about this, that in 1912, we weren't even legally citizens of the United States. That came about through the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924. And as a result of a lot of Native people fighting along with others in the World War I. Not only that, but in 1948 was when the Arizona state gave Native Americans in the state the right to vote. So he was doing all of this on his own terms, not according to how he's been portrayed. He remained a traditional Hopi. His legacy is that the federal policy of assimilation failed. He did not become a trophy of colonization. He never gained a strong proficiency in English. He never got distressed by losses because he wasn't running for winning, fame, or fortune. He was running for a deeper purpose. Medals meant little to him. He even forgot to pick up one after a win. And he gave some to friends when leaving Carlisle. And when he got back home, he gave them to Hopi children as toys. Most of the countless awards and trophies he won are lost. Llewellyn White says, boarding schools serve as a tool for descendants to understand a dizzying and complicated history. I agree, and also embrace Chanina Lomawaima's comment that I am inspired by this understanding of Tata's act of rebellion, although he wouldn't describe it this way. So I commit to remember the resistance he and all the thousands who came through the school, those surviving and those not, our ancestors who refused to go along, and in so doing, tell their stories to the younger generations. This picture of him in 1954 in New York was sent to me by my daughter, which was a demonstration to me of the fact that even though I'm not telling my own children these stories in a deliberate way, I guess just my, I don't know what it is, but some or other they're hearing the story just through me. And so I was really surprised when she texted me this picture one day, just very recently. And the other things that I found out in the digital archives is the age discrepancy. In a lot of the literature that has been coming out about Lewis, he's been described as being 34 years old. The stories on back home are where that he was already married. And that's why when he came back, his wife Blanche wouldn't let him talk about these stories. Because my godmother was his daughter, all those years that I was interested in Tewanima, I was looking to see if I could get stories from her about him. And I think one day she finally realized that this was kind of my seeking without asking. And she said to me, I think you want his stories, and she was saying this in Hopi, but our mother wouldn't allow him to talk about it because it was a painful part of her life. So what he did was he went around to all of these homes. Our whole village is a community. You could go into anyone's home and it was family. So he would go around and tell other people who were willing to listen to him, but not very many of mine. Although my mother, Laura, remembers that because she grew up along with my biological mother at the sheep camp. They spent a lot of time herding sheep. He used to be there also, and he would have the boys and the girls compete, and he would tell them, he would draw a line and have them race against each other because that's what he remembered doing here in Carlisle. The other thing that kind of made me really see that he was real, that he was really here, was that in his records, there's a medical report of his having tonsillitis, and the diet that he was given at that time. I also learned that he was a tailor, but the description about him in that subject or content area was very moderate. I guess he didn't excel, but he had an excellent disposition. And again, he was just a little guy, and that's what they called him. With 5 feet 4.5 inches, 128 pounds he was. The other thing that I remember that sticks in my mind, and I asked him to be here with me, was, Tata, if I'm doing okay, just grind your dentures. That's what I used to hear him do. He was just always grinning and grinding his dentures when he came around. So I have some good memories, and I also grew up with a lot of our community members talking about the very words he used to say here, which was like, me run fast good, all Hopis run fast. And the stories that he used to tell people of running to Winslow, 60 miles away, so a 120-mile round trip, just to watch the trains go by. I've also been interested to find out where he has been in this eastern part of the United States. I was in New York a number of years ago and stood outside Madison Square Garden just looking at the building because I knew he ran there as well. I want to walk where he walked. I've been looking forward to coming to Carlisle one day for many, many years, and I'm finally here, and so I hope to spend some time walking where he walked here while I'm here before I leave back to Tucson. But Asqueli for listening to his story.